July edition of our social media all-call. We'll have an abbreviated session today. Really just wanted to focus on social listening. This is a follow-up for our quarters to the training that was done. The Global Digital team has been using social listening regularly. It has become an invaluable tool for us and was kind of an important part of the implementation process. So I recognize it's a relatively new feature functionality for a lot of us. So I thought after the training, we would take some real-world examples and some more TNC-specific use cases for how social listening can be used. We'll walk through a few examples here. I've just built out a couple scenarios. Also have just in the process created some resources for you all to leverage as you'd like. They'll be available to you. And then hopefully have some good discussion on that. Open it up for Q&A, and then we'll wrap up with a kind of a sneak peek at some upcoming editorial plans for us. So without further ado, we'll jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. And this is, again, going to be a kind of a combination of some PowerPoint and just some jumping into the tool. Oops, let's see how I can fix this. One sec. Just gonna, can everyone see the opening slide there?
I can.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, before we get started, just a quick shout out. I wanted to congratulate, now that we've had Khoros on board for a few months now, I wanted to congratulate a few of our all-stars. Thank you, Bree, for pulling some quick data for us, but wanted to recognize these 6 individuals here as our most consistent Khoros publishers. Noelle, Whitney, Sarah, Nikolai, Larissa, and Lisa. Thank you all. We are so grateful. I think you guys have represented using the platform, really kind of adopting it in a consistent way, getting all of your social content in through Khoros, and that means a lot to us. It helps us do better analysis of our data. It helps us understand how content is performing. It gives us better visibility, and it is something we are monitoring and tracking closely. So thank you to you all. Okay, now let's get into it. Yeah, so I mentioned we would jump into some social listening scenarios and give everyone some context on how they can be thinking about Khoros and some more TNC-specific applications of the tool. On the Global Digital team, as I mentioned, we're using it pretty often. I'm in intelligence, the intelligence side is what Khoros calls it, much more often than I am any other section of Khoros. And it's helpful for me to kind of get a gut check on how people are communicating in social media. We'll get into some of the specifics here, but I think at a macro level, there are 3 kind of scenarios that I think we should all be considering using Khoros just to get a sense of conversation and help inform our ideas and planning. So the first one I think is the easiest place to start is just general monitoring of news and topics and people and influencers and things like that. There's also some competitive analysis. When I say competitive analysis, I'm mostly thinking of who else is out there talking about the same kinds of things that we are. They might be organizations or they might just be individuals. The competitive analysis gives us a sense of word usage, messaging, imagery, things like that. In the same way that Lindsay's talked about the importance of creating the perfect headline for your article on nature.org. Social listening can kind of do the same to help inform some of the messaging and the writing and the word choices that we use in social media. And then finally, the last one is just kind of thinking through the editorial process and coming up with ways that you might use social listening to think through your own editorial process and what you're kind of planning out for content in the future. Okay. So the first thing I'll start with is social listening is a really helpful tool, but there's a lot of things it's not very good at. We'll start with the things that it's good at. Social listening is always kind of scouring social for public conversation. So there are a lot of social channels out there. Most of them are private. The most public channel that is out there really is Twitter. So by and large, I kind of always think about Khoros intelligence and social listening as a tool to kind of measure conversation on Twitter. That's the place where I think people have kind of accepted that, you know, content really is meant for a public forum and for a wider audience. Social listening is really good for time-sensitive alerts, and we'll get into some of those. In this case, it's not really about the total volume of conversation, but it might be that one tweet or Instagram post from an influencer that you're waiting for, or it might be the one or two posts that are driving a lot of engagement or, you know, going viral, or you know, you want some immediate response to something that's happening out there. It's really good for those types of things. Yes, it like a general, you know, monitoring of volume of conversation. Yes, it will do that. It can also identify a lot of influencers for us. You know, there's so many people out there that, you know, we might consider influencers. Social listening is a tool that can help quickly evaluate a person's general, you know, level of influence, or how many followers, or how big their network is. It can help us inform insights for some of our content, which we'll get into. And then what the Global Digital team has been using it a lot for lately is supplementing some of our earned media tracking. So anytime, you know, a major publication or organization is talking about us, we can get, you know, kind of an instant look at that conversation or those messages. So those are the things it's good at. It's also not good at a lot of things. And the easiest place to start is Facebook. And that is not really about Khoros at all. It's really about that on Facebook, people have some pretty strict privacy settings kind of baked into their accounts, which means that when people post to Facebook, more often than not, they are private or intended for, you know, friends and family and not much else. So certainly Khoros will tell us that social listening can be used on Facebook, but really we're getting just a small fraction of the total conversation that's happening there. It's also not a good space for absolute metrics or just a comprehensive analysis, right? Like I would never rely on Khoros intelligence to tell me total volume of conversation or a complete look at all conversation around a specific topic. One, because privacy settings are in place on all social platforms, and two, there are just times when I think like social listening won't capture every single tweet or Instagram post or things like that. It's a tool that I think is meant, you should think about as more directional to help kind of guide some of your ideas or thought process, but not something you should use definitively to say we generated X number of engagements. I think we can get a pretty good guess and get close, but we'll never be absolute or perfect there. Khoros intelligence, I'll say, is not meant for social media engagement. Khoros has Inbox and other tools available that are meant for directly responding to people. So don't think of intelligence really as a product to kind of see something and want to respond to it immediately, you can do that, but there are other places on Khoros to do that. Geographic data and sentiment analysis, also the same is true there. One, most people don't apply geographic information to their tweets or their Instagram posts. So in a lot of cases, Khoros is just guessing. And I don't know how accurate that could possibly be. And then same is true for sentiment analysis. All of these tools will claim that their machine learning is always trying to optimize and figure out the sentiment of a post, but it's never going to be perfect. So I saw a couple questions come in, and I'll just check those here. Okay. Aaron asks, what about Instagram? So yes, actually, Khoros Intelligence does now monitor Instagram fairly well. I think Twitter is still going to be the best, but we are starting to collect a lot of good Instagram listening analysis. And I'll get into an example of a case where it might be useful to do some social listening on Instagram. Cool. All right, and the next thing is a lot of social listening is art and science. And in this case, what you plug into intelligence really matters, because you're telling intelligence what you're looking for. But words, as we know, mean different things to different people. I have 3 examples here with 3 very different numbers. So I pulled this. Within the past month, you'll see that climate change comes up in different ways. So in the first example, we're looking for all tweets that mention the phrase climate change, where climate and change appear together in the quotes that they are, seen like that. In option 2, Khoros is looking for the keywords climate and change, but not necessarily together, right? So someone might be saying, they might be talking about climate and then saying change is needed, right? Right. That's a different way of searching for climate change. And then the last one, we're telling Khoros to look for climate or change. And obviously this is the biggest one because change is such a broad word. So I use this as an example to think through, and I chose kind of a big topic just to illustrate the differences here. But keywords do matter, and oftentimes what I find most useful is the smaller number is always best. You'll find that Khoros has a lot of ability to fine-tune some of your social listening, so you're only looking at what you want. There's always kind of this idea, if you plug something really broad in, there will be a lot of garbage in there that doesn't really mean anything to us. So it's always useful to get a really specific search phrase in there so that you're capturing exactly what you want. And we'll get into how you can kind of finesse and make that right. Jump in here real quick. Lindsay asks, does the social listening keywords include variations like plurals or tense? It's a great question. So no, in this case, it's only looking for change. If I wanted to include the plural or various tenses, I would have to tell Khoros to look for that. So that's a good question. Thank you, Lindsay. All right. So scenario number 1, we'll jump into Khoros here, but I just thought I'd give a quick snapshot to show you what we're looking at. The first one that I'll get into is a resource that I'll make available to everyone if you're interested. It's the cool thing about Khoros and intelligence is you can create a search or social listening profile and then save it and share it out with the entire group. So the Global Digital team has created a social listening profile in intelligence that tracks all mentions of state and, well, I say all, most, it's pretty close. Most state and country directors and anytime the state or country director name is used in combination with the Nature Conservancy. So in here, again, we're not looking for volume of mentions. In fact, I wouldn't expect, I mean, gosh, it would be great if we had, thousands and thousands of mentions. It would be great if we had thousands of mentions of, people talking about our state directors. The reality is it's not the case. But you might imagine that if someone out there is talking about a state director and TNC, it might be really valuable to us to know that. Or it might represent a really good opportunity to engage with that person or identify them as an influencer or capture that in an earned media report. There are lots of different opportunities where like total volume of mentions really doesn't mean much to us here, but we're looking for those fewer instances that matter most. So in this case, we're looking at all the state and country directors and the terms and accounts that are associated with those responses. So in here, you can kind of get a sense, looks like Texas is in the mix, Tennessee looks like it's in there, and then we're getting some of the local media that might be mentioning them. This is all kind of helpful. And as we dig into the tool, we can dive into each one of these keywords to get a closer look and see what the message actually was. But before I do that, I wanted to kind of highlight where I find the most value in social listening. And this is kind of the like set it and forget it model, where you create the social listening profile in Intelligence, and you set up an alert so that you tell Khoros, look, I'm always going to be wanting to search for my state director. Anytime that state director is mentioned, I want to know about it, but I don't want to have to log into the tool and check every day. So Khoros has these smart alerts that are set up to handle that for us. So in this case, you're seeing what that configuration could look like. And we have a bunch of these set up. And these are all able to be configured by anyone that has access to Khoros. So in this case, there's two options. One is you can click the smart notification button, and this tells Khoros that, hey, I want to get an email or an alert on my phone. I think it's an alert on your phone, or if you have the app, I think it's an email, sorry. If Khoros deems that the topic is trending or generating more engagement than some of the previous posts. That's helpful, but I actually prefer some of the volume-based alerts in the second option here. So in these cases, especially where we don't expect a lot of volume, I like selecting one of these, right? So you can see in this example here, I'm telling Khoros that anytime a phrase is entered that I'm searching for in Khoros is posted on Twitter, I want an email immediately. And I want that email sent to myself and Monica. So in this case, in the example that we're using here, we have a social listening profile set up so that anytime anyone uses the canned language on a donation page when someone makes a donation and clicks the share button on Twitter, there's a canned response there. And we know it's always the same. So anytime that happens, Monica and I get an email in our inbox alerting us that someone has posted it. And the email looks something like this. Well, it looks exactly like this, actually. This one just came in today. So this is automatically being sent to myself and Monica without having logged into the platform, letting us know that this person, Hal, in this case, we know has donated to TNC because this is the language that is used in the social share button on a donation page after the donation is made. So it's a great use case because we can go directly in here and respond and say, thanks so much for your donation, grateful for your support, etc. And it helps us build better relationships and helps people feel like validated and kind of assured that we're listening and appreciative of their donation, which is great. If you felt like that was too much, there is also another option to set up a digest. This is a helpful scenario, particularly if you wanted to send this to non-social admins, right? Maybe you have a supervisor or someone outside of social that kind of wants a daily digest of a particular conversation. You can send that out. Maddie will know this, that we get a kind of a daily digest of our senior leaders every day. It's just kind of a quick, it's not meant to give us kind of total volume of conversation. It just is highlighting some of the notable mentions from that talk about our senior leaders in this case. So the one we received today has a lot of mentions about Q, which is awesome, but it gives us a sense of the type of conversation. It's not meant to be comprehensive or absolute total metrics, just a general directional quick look at the conversation based on the profile that we've built out. So I'll jump out now and show you that example that we have. So I have a lot of different examples here, and I'll, if you have questions about how these are set up, please let me know. So in this case, you'll see that I have most of the state directors listed here. But if I included just this on it by itself, I might get a lot of noise about, Michelle Carr, who might be someone else, right? Like not affiliated at all with TNC, but just so happens to have the same name. So in this case, I'm telling Khoros that I want to look for all of these names and that mention any of the terms or accounts. So in this case, the only return I will get is if any of these names come up in a tweet with Nature Conservancy or our handle, nature_org. So when I do that, you'll see that there have been 27 tweets within the past 2 months. Again, not a lot, but each one of these represents a really kind of fine-tuned message that likely is exactly about what we're looking for. And just a quick glance at the results looks like it's on point here. So again, you can get a quick look. It's just showing us the highlights of some of the tweets. So here's Carlos being represented. That's great. I can dig into any one of these hashtags if I want. So if I can click here. So now it's digging into our social listening profile and going to show us within our search where Tennessee is being used. So now we're seeing this post from Tennessee. Helpful, hopefully. Further deeper dive, I can get a sense of volume of the conversation and kind of when those tweets are being sent out by day. Not sure if that's helpful or not. Where there's a lot of volume, this growth column is really useful, so you can get a sense of, is this level of conversation more than usual, less than usual, on par? It's helpful to kind of get a quick sense there. So again, this is a profile that is available. You can all access this. I will make sure it is shared with the entire Khoros user base, and you can use this if you want. Another one to look at, more of like a monitoring one here, I wanted to show this here is, so I've taken most of our Twitter handles that we have. So I'm just asking Khoros, hey, show me any tweets that mention any of our handles here. But then I'm also adding on another layer here. So I'm building out a profile that's kind of multi-dimensional, which is can be helpful as a comparative look here. So I'm saying, show me all the mentions of all of these handles collectively, and then also show me mentions of the global channel, nature_org. And so what you see here is now Khoros has broken those listening keywords into 2 buckets here. And what's nice about that is if I only wanted to see one, I could just turn one off and Khoros will take it away. And now I'm only looking at that collective group, right? So what you're seeing here is just a collective of all our TNC handles. Turning this back on, you're getting more of that comparative look. All the same is, still true. I can get a sense of the trending content, what those messages were, the types of tweets that were coming in. You can also export them too. So if you wanted like this might take a while. If you wanted a spreadsheet, it will generate a spreadsheet for you of all of the tweets that come in. You can see here. You can do like an instant download, or if you want the whole thing, sometimes depending on the volume of conversation, it might take a while, but it becomes available to you. Could be helpful for, reporting or sending this on to other people outside of Khoros. The other one, just a lot of monitoring reports here. I don't expect a lot of mentions or volume really, but what we've done here is add all our US Senator handles in here and included all variations of the brand name TNC or the Nature Conservancy. So this Khoros is looking for any senator that mentions TNC. I want to know about it and get an alert about it. So you're seeing, again, not a lot of mentions, which feels right. But those that do come out are certainly going to be valuable for us. I think that is all. It looks like I got a question here. Jump in. Evelyn says, does intelligence and social listening replace the stats we used to get from Sprout on engagement? I'm not sure. Maybe Adam, you might know. I'm not familiar with how Sprout uses.
No, I wouldn't imagine it would.
Yeah. Okay.
Like that.
So Evelyn, it doesn't look. I think those are different products.
Yeah, there was one part of Sprout that seemed kind of like social listening, but it only provided it for things that we were actively mentioned in. So you couldn't search beyond that.
Right. Okay. All right. Moving on. Zoom is in my way here. All right. I think. Yeah, last one, I promise. Don't want to belabor the point. This one's just looking at any mentions of the global channel and people just using the Nature Conservancy. And here's our membership one that we know about. So these are all people that have donated to us. Gives us a chance to respond to them, but also gives a sense of kind of benchmarking, like how often is this being used, which is helpful for us in our conversations with the membership team to get a better sense of, is this being used often? Is there a way for us to improve how often it's being used? Those kinds of things. All right. Let me jump back in here. The next scenario that, let's see, I wanted to walk through was Instagram. Okay, so photo contest is coming up. As part of our, competitive analysis in this sense, the creative team and Global Digital have been kind of looking out in the universe at all the other photo contests that are happening. And there have been a lot of recent ones, actually. Audubon just wrapped up. But the one I'm featuring here is unique. It's from Nat Geo. So I think to celebrate their millionth follower on Instagram, they did this photo campaign where they asked people to submit. I think they were looking for 1 million photos on Instagram, and use the hashtag NatGeo100 contest. So this is a helpful tool because pretty clear. We can see exactly when the campaign started. Looks like it was mid-May. And we're seeing that the interesting thing about posts by time of day is interesting because seeing that posts come in at all times of the day suggests to me that this is broad enough to be an internationally driven campaign. There's enough content coming in at all hours of the day that, you know, suggests people from all time zones are publishing content. I'm always interested in the growth of hashtags. I think, you know, Nat Geo probably started the first one, the Nat Geo 100 contest, but, you know, the community really kind of dictates the other hashtags that are being used. So in this case, you could kind of get a sense of where the community was also posting content and the types of content that they were posting. And then a new feature on Khoros is the most active accounts, which is helpful for us to just get a sense of who our fans are and what they're talking about. Okay, so here's Instagram, and here is that social profile here, social listening profile here. Khoros just implemented Instagram search, so I think if you're looking for content prior to February, it won't come up, but anything after that will. So it doesn't have a lot of good historical information as of yet, but maybe that will change. So all the same things are true that we saw on the Twitter side, right? We can still get a sense of the content. In this case, it's helpful, I think, from thinking through the planning for the photo contest that TNT will run, is the type of language that people use in their posts. You know, obviously on Instagram, people are going to tack on a lot of different hashtags, which is kind of a norm we see on that channel. This takes a minute to load here. It'll come. But I can search by media type, which is really helpful. So I can search, you know, maybe I just want to see the video content. I can get a breakdown of that and sort it by various ways, right? So, you know, if I was doing some type of contest, I could look at, you know, the most liked comment or things like that, which is helpful. And what's nice about Instagram is you don't actually have to leave the platform. Khoros here, we can just click directly in here to get a sense of what that video was. Of course, it's not going to play for me. Just use your imagination. And then the terms, of course, as I mentioned, gives us a sense of the type of content that is being shared here. So you can see birds come in. India is being used often. Nikon, Canon, right? A lot of photographers probably sharing what camera they use, things like that. Again, hopefully providing some directional information to us to help us kind of inform our planning. And speaking of planning, the last scenario I'll go through here is thinking through editorial. And again, I wanted to show two kind of broad terms to kind of illustrate a few points here. So in this case, I'm looking at two different phrases. I'm looking at climate change and biodiversity. And again, I'm splitting those out so you can see those are being searched under different kind of topics. And I can add as many different sections as I want. Some of our other profiles have lots of these built out, which is helpful. And I'll also say that Khoros makes it really helpful, gives you these guides, right? So in this case, this is what the social listening will look like. You can add on any one of these just by clicking them, right? So I can click any one of these. What's a good one to choose? Author bio terms, right? So in this case, I'm looking for all of the words or the keywords around climate change and biodiversity. Well, let's say I want to say biodiversity from scientists, right? In this case, I'm looking at Twitter, and then I'm going to apply this with author bio terms and say just scientist. So what this is doing now is it's telling Khoros, okay, I want to search for the keyword biodiversity, but I only want you to show me results from people that have the word scientist in their profile, in their bio. If I do this, I'll get a much smaller result. But again, that fine tuning helps kind of assure and know what I'm looking at. So in this case, we dropped down to only 662 tweets. But in theory, right, people can put whatever they want in a bio or in a profile. In theory, what I'm looking at really is from the scientific community here, which, as you might imagine, might severely change the overall listening profile here, but helpful. The other thing I was going to mention is the content type can be interesting too, just from a directional sense. And I use climate change to illustrate this point. It won't always be this crystal clear. But in this case, actually, I'll turn off biodiversity. We all know how polarizing a topic climate change is. And so what this is telling me here on content type is 50% are tweets, right? These are the original posts from people. But 41% of what is being pulled in from intelligence are replies. This is just an easy, quick way for me to get a sense that, like, this is a really polarizing conversation. It is an active one. There are a lot of people talking about it, not just putting new content out there. It's almost kind of a watch out in a way, right? Like, by posting content around climate change, you might expect to get a lot of responses because 41% of them are replies. Again, sentiment, not really that useful, but you see it there. The last thing I'll show is on this people tab here. You can get a sense of influencers, which is helpful, right? So in this case, I'm looking for climate change, which again, I know is not the best topic, but in here I can get a pull from, I only want to see tweets from Bill Gates that mention climate change within the past 30 days. And it's going to show me them directly. So I can click and open up Twitter to see what they look like. Or send a link off to someone. It just kind of gives me a better sense of what that is. So there it is. Right. So the last thing I'll show is on the fine-tuning options here. So on this sidebar here, there's a range of options that you can run through to kind of fine-tune the social listening. So in this case, time range, this is the one I use most often. You can tell Khoros how wide a range you want to look. I think the max time range is 90 days here. So you have a 90-day window to look. If you wanted kind of a year-long look, you really kind of have to stitch together a bunch of profiles. So that's helpful. You can choose specific months and even get down to the time of day, right? So if you wanted to look for all tweets that happened within the month of May that starts at 4 in the morning, you could do that. Location, I suggest use with extreme caution. Again, not everyone puts in their location information, so what you will see is going to be a very small sample of the total conversation. If you wanted to look for specific accounts, you could do that, or you wanted to create a filter that showed the number of mentions around a specific topic, but really had a minimum amount of followers. So like you might set up one for influencers or someone that had a lot of a bigger audience. You might set that up. You saw an example of this where you could filter out by including some keywords that have to show up in the bio for the social listening profile to show up. Curated lists, I haven't explored too much, but we do have a few in here that are worth exploring. So TNC senior leaders or Twitter accounts show up. So if you wanted to see tweets that involved or mentioned those social listening profiles, you could. Language can be useful in some cases for maybe more of our international colleagues. This is also useful if you wanted to plug in a link. If we had a specific link, wanted to see if that link was being shared out, you could plug that in. And then the tweet type, use caution on sentiments. but maybe we just wanted to see the retweets or people that were sharing an image or something like that. You could apply those filters. So I think that is it. Does anyone have questions or comments, or you can also just jump in and start a new search if anyone wanted to do one live, we could do one. No questions. That's okay. All right then. The last thing I'll say here is just give everyone kind of a quick heads up on what's coming up from a content planning perspective. You can see this, I hope you can. Cumberland Forest Project, the article is out, doing quite well, trending on nature.org. We're seeing lots of really strong social engagement there, so feel free to promote that. The photo contest is coming up. We'll start in August. Myself, Monica, and Julia are working on finalizing that social content, which will be made available to you all by the end of next week. We've got a lot of good imagery and videos that will be coming in. And we're also going to do a lot more proactive cycling in of new photo content. So as we're generating more submissions, we'll make sure to get that content out to you so you can have fresh content to use throughout the month. There's an exciting back to school campaign from our colleagues on the Africa team. We'll follow up with some more content as that gets finalized, but that's slated for the end of August. And then, of course, a lot happening on climate action in September from Global Comms, from membership, from North America. We're really trying to aggregate and collect a lot of our content there. So we'll be sharing a lot of information out about that shortly. Okay. Thanks for your time, everyone. I'll be around. You can answer questions. Hope you found this useful. And if you want a deeper dive into social listening, by all means, feel free to reach out.